Welcome back to the show today. We're talking about NBA players who look past their best interest and decide to play through pain. One thing we don't really talk about is the varying degrees of injuries or the varying degrees of pain a player might be in. Also, the idea that there are different doctors with different opinions, and those opinions are informed by different interests. What do I mean by this? I mean the medical staff of a team needs to please the team. They're the most likely to encourage a player to get back on the court and start contributing. But the player sometimes has their own medical staff, and that medical staff has its own agenda. If their agenda is to have the player have as long of a career as possible, because if their guy's career ends, they don't have a job anymore. For instance, Kawhi Leonard has been one of the most fragile players in the NBA. It started in 2018 when he was with the San Antonio Spurs. Kawhi was coming off his ankle injury that he had in the Western Conference Finals of 2017. This was when Zaza Pachulia stepped under his landing space, causing Kawhi to land awkwardly and never return to the court. But the weird thing is, this actually ended up hurting his quadricep in the long run. He developed tendinopathy or tendinitis, whatever you want to call it, and he missed the first 27 games of the next season. The Spurs medical staff clears him to play. Kawhi obviously didn't feel very great, so he hired his own medical staff to get a second opinion. Kawhi's medical staff said, no, you're not ready, you can't play, you gotta continue rehab. This caused a lot of tension between Kawhi and the organization, because the Spurs medical staff was like, hey, we're good, don't you trust us? Go play. And Kawhi was already pissed because he believes that the organization told him to go out and play when he wasn't ready, when he was still feeling weak. So Kawhi ends up completely cutting off communication with them. And not only that, his teammates themselves believed he should have been playing. In early March, there was a players-only meeting held in the locker room of the San Antonio Spurs, where the Spurs actually begged him to play, which you would understand because Kawhi was their best player. Finals MVP, DPOY, All-NBA. They saw him disengaging and they were very worried about it. I think the straw that broke the camel's back, though, was Tony Parker comparing Kawhi's injury to his own, though he said his quad injury was 100 times worse than Kawhi, also saying that he trusted the medical staff, so Kawhi should too. At this point, Kawhi was done for the season. He was out. He wanted to trade. And he got it. The Spurs traded him that offseason to the Raptors. The Raptors treated him how he wanted to be treated, though. He only played 60 games that season, which worked because if you didn't know, the Raptors won in 2019. You knew. Now, let's talk about Kawhi's tenure with the Clippers so far. So after Kawhi wins the championship with the Raptors, he becomes a free agent, and he signs with the Los Angeles Clippers instead of signing with the team he just won a championship with, the Toronto Raptors. Probably too cold for him, and at that point, he probably thought he could win a championship anyway. And at this point, people weren't really talking about Kawhi's knee tendinopathy anymore. He was just the hottest free agent that year in the offseason. The Lakers wanted him, the Knicks wanted him, the Nets wanted him, but they were reminded of that tendinopathy pretty quickly. They let him manage his load during the 2019-2020 season. He's also given an extremely long break because of the pandemic. He had a great regular season, and he actually had a really great postseason as well, until the Western Conference semifinals that year. The Clippers went up on the Nuggets 3-1, but something happened after that. Kawhi did not have the juice. The Nuggets ended up coming back and winning the series. Kawhi only scoring 14 points and shooting 27% from the field, or from three-point range, I think. Now, Kawhi and the Clippers didn't want to make any excuses for the poor performance, but the terms general soreness and nagging knee injury were used quite a bit in media coverage. At this point, it was becoming clear that Kawhi could not handle playoff basketball. He was playing every night, and he was playing over 40 minutes a game. It just wasn't going to work for him, and this was him trying to play through that pain. Same story the following season. He managed his load, had a good season though, only to tear his ACL during the Western Conference semifinals against Utah. This was proving that if the Clippers were going to use Kawhi effectively, it was going to have to be in small doses. So cut to the playoffs of 2023. Kawhi tears his meniscus in Game 1 against the Phoenix Suns, but he comes back, plays in Game 2, and drops 31 points with a torn meniscus. But it's obviously just too much for him, and he has to sit out the rest of the series, and the Phoenix Suns win. And the same thing happened last year in the playoffs too. I don't want to repeat the same story. You're a basketball fan, you watch. But this season, the Clippers said, you're not even going to play half the season, Kawhi. You're going to play 37 games of the regular season, and that is it. Let all that cartilage in your knee heal as much as possible. Hopefully, we can win a championship before your tendons start to inflame again. And it's not a bad strategy because James Harden was able to carry the whole team through the regular season on his back. Now they can dust off Kawhi and hopefully win a championship. Now, Kawhi is kind of on an expensive contract to only really use him for the postseason, but it does beat losing him in the postseason every year. So some of y'all might remember the tragedy of Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah Thomas was and is an incredibly skilled basketball player. The problem is he's pretty short. He's only 5'9". So he ended up going last in the 2011 NBA draft. But the Boston Celtics were a team that saw a lot of potential in Isaiah. So they got him in a trade from the Phoenix Suns in 2015. But the following year was when Isaiah Thomas really broke out. He became the lowest second-round pick to make an All-Star team since 1989. But the following year, he took it up to another level. He averaged 28.9 points a game and made second-team All-NBA. He finished 5th in MVP voting. The whole city loved him too. The Boston Celtics were the #1 seed in the East that year. But here's here's where the story gets super sad, man. The day before the first game of the playoffs, Isaiah Thomas's sister passed away from being in a fatal car accident. But Isaiah still played the following day in game 1 against the Bulls. And I know it's not really playing injured, but in some ways it is. I'm sure in a lot of ways playing through that emotional pain is more difficult than playing through an injury. But then he does experience a physical injury. In the second round of the playoffs, IT drops 53 on the Wizards, on what would later appear to be a labral tear in his hip. Isaiah didn't want to let his team down, and then the Boston Celtics medical staff said he was good to go to play. They told him he didn't need surgery, he just needed a couple of cortisone shots. Obviously, Isaiah is gonna play then. He trusts the medical staff. He even gets the Celtics to the Eastern Conference Finals. But after game 2, the pain was just too much to bear. He couldn't play anymore. Isaiah Thomas was ruled out for the rest of the series against the Cavs. But here is the messed up part. Isaiah was coming up on a contract extension with the Celtics. And after making second team All-NBA, he was eligible for a max contract. But the Celtics flagged that injury as a risk to signing him to a longer contract, conveniently after the playoffs. So instead of extending him, they traded him to the Cavs for Kyrie. From what I know, I think this is one of the most despicable moves in NBA history. Danny Ainge, the general manager at the time, said that the Celtics would never encourage an injured player to play. But if you're in the middle of the playoffs and it's your star player you're talking about, it's gonna change the way you see the situation, and you're probably gonna err on the side of the team. Most of y'all don't know about Willis Reed. You're very young. I honestly didn't know about Willis Reed until I researched this video. Willis Reed is the ultimate example of dude being a hero. In the 1970s NBA Finals, the Knicks were playing the Lakers. That was the Elgin Baylor, Jerry West, Wilt Chamberlain team. They were good. Willis Reed was the starting center for the New York Knicks. He tore his thigh muscle in game 5 of that series. You can see that he falls down on top of the ball. From my diagnosis, this looks like a really bad Charlie horse, which I've actually experienced. And I can attest it would be basically impossible to play basketball after. I cried when it happened to me. So Reed ends up having to sit out game 6 and the Lakers win, forcing a game 7. The problem was, without Willis, the Knicks had no one to guard Wilt Chamberlain. So with the help of a cortisone shot and strength of will, he plays in game 7. Here's him literally limping out onto the court. No one thought Willis was gonna play, but he said he just had to try for his team. So he scores the first 2 baskets for the Knicks. Nothing crazy, just 2 jumpers. He ended up willing the Knicks to win the NBA Finals. Although Wilt Chamberlain did have 24 rebounds to Willis's 3 rebounds. Willis brought value to the team mostly through spirit. If we're talking about failed attempts to play through injury, we've got to talk about the 2019 Warriors. This was the final year of Durant in Golden State, and unfortunately he wasn't able to finish his time in the Bay with a killer finals performance like the previous 2 years he had. The real tragedy is Durant played 78 games that year. He showed no sign of any nagging injuries. He averaged 35 points a game in the first series against the Clippers, but during game 5 against the Houston Rockets, KD goes down with a calf strain, not an Achilles injury. The Warriors win anyway, and then they go play the Portland Trail Blazers in the Western Conference Finals and they sweep them. They didn't even need KD to do it. Now at this point, Warriors fans were wondering, is KD being too cautious? I mean, it's just a strain and we're about to enter the NBA Finals. But KD doesn't come back for game 1. Then in game 2, Klay Thompson leaves with a hamstring strain. Steph has to be like, damn, don't you guys stretch? So Klay sits out game 3. Now it's game 5 and the Raptors are up 3-1. And it's now or never, so Durant says, you know what, I'm gonna play. I'm gonna go out there and play on this busted calf. It was his last chance. What's he gonna do? So KD starts the game, he's playing really well, but then 11 minutes in, he tears his Achilles. If you're a sick bastard like me, you can actually zoom in and see his calf jiggle. I think KD knew he wasn't ready, but he also knew he wasn't gonna leave the Bay without trying. And then in game 6, Klay's hamstring strain turns into a full-on ACL tear. The Golden State Warriors lose the game and ultimately lose the finals. I think the only time a player should try to even play through an injury are times like these. If you're in the NBA Finals and you can even give a fraction of what you give in a normal game. Also, let's not gloss over the fact that the fans want you to play. This isn't a random game in February where you can just sort of sit out if you have a stub toe or a hangnail. To some degree, fans and the organization and your teammates expect you to play through some type of pain and assume a little bit of risk of further injury. I think that's sort of the plight of being a star athlete. You're gonna feel tremendous pressure to put the team's needs before your own and your future career opportunities and earnings. All right, thank you for being here. Like the video if you enjoyed the video. Leave a recommendation. Give me a comment. I'll reply to the comment. Thank you to everyone who joined the Patreon. It's $2. You get a weekly episode. I don't know what I'm gonna talk about this week. We talked about negative stats in the NBA. Be good to you, mammies. Eat a corn dog.